no matter our age, no matter our context or station in life, girls and women are under this maternal lens. Little girls are called little mothers, where we are thought of as reproductive beings. The truth is that many women will go on to never become mothers, whether through biology or adoption or neighboring. And many women will, similarly never be partnered. They may never engage in a marriage or romantic relationship. The foundational role that we have is as daughters. We are a daughter the day we are born, and we are a daughter the day we die.
Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, coach, musician, author, publisher, and I am passionate about helping others reclaim their stories so they can build their most beautiful future. I'm so glad you're here for another episode of Talks with Dr. Shafer. Our stories often start and are influenced by our early life experiences. One experience that women can all relate to is the experience of being a daughter. My guest today, Dr. Allison Alford, is a clinical associate professor in the Department of Information Systems and Business Analytics who studied communication studies with a concentration in interpersonal communication. Dr. Alford owns and operates the coaching and consulting firm Good Talk Communication Consulting and has spearheaded research on the topic of adult daughtering, work-family balance, and invisible labor. She hosts the podcast, Hello Mother, Hello Daughter, and is the author of the newly released book inspired by her research entitled Good Daughtering, The Work You've Always Done, the Credit You've Never Gotten, and How to Finally Feel Like Enough, released by Day Street Books in February 2026. Dr. Alford, thank you so much for being on the show today to share everything that you have learned through your research and work with our audience. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Shafer. I feel like it is so essential for us to dig down to these parts of ourselves and our roles that are really connected to our health.
They truly are, because the way that we daughter and our daughtering really shows up in the way we show up in relationships across the board. Now, I want to know off the top here, what inspired you to study daughtering and to share all you've learned with readers in your book, Daughters? Where did this story really start for you?
For me, the story of daughtering and investigating and uncovering what it is started over 10 years ago when I was a graduate student. And, as a student, you're given a lot of stuff to read and explore and investigate because you're trying to find out, what do we already know? And how does that inform what we still need to know? So also, you're looking for a gap. You're looking for things we don't yet know about and haven't uncovered. What's kind of cool is that aligns with, in general, what my mindset is like. I'm always looking for or noticing what's not there, what's not being said, who wasn't invited, what sort of topics are not coming into the debate. My mind just has this ability or or maybe intensity that centers me in that space. So as I was reading through a lot of the literature about different types of family issues, and I was also thinking, well, I really want to know more, not just about how families are broken and messed up, but what makes families good? What makes families thrive? How can people communicate in ways that stimulate flourishing in families? And as I continued to look into those things, I learned a lot about social reproductive labor, invisible labor, kin keeping, kin work. And these are all describing kind of the same thing, which is the ways that women work in our social life outside of our paid employment that are often overlooked. And as I was thinking about women and work and what's overlooked, my biggest question was, what else? I know there's more. I know there's other ways that we're being overlooked as well, because that is unfortunately true of the society we live in. And that's what brought me to thinking that sort of, uh, you know, influence, confluence brought me into this space of thinking, what do we still need to know? What's important to doing well and flourishing in our lives? And how are women being overlooked? And that's how I landed on daughtering.
Mm. And I'm so glad you did. The work is so important. To give some operational definitions for our listeners who may not have heard, I think a good one to hone in on is the invisible labor, because that term is being thrown around. What is your operational definition of invisible labor, and how does it impact women, daughters disproportionately?
So, invisible labor means a type of working that you're doing that anyone could be doing that uses resources from your body, from your time, from your money, from your energy, from your mental faculties. And you're doing this work, but it's being taken for granted. And it's often even taken for granted by the people who are doing the work because we lack the language to talk about it, and because we lack the opportunity to share and communicate about that experience. So those are some of the reasons why something stays invisible. So for daughters, what that means and what I found in my research is that women, when we think of being a daughter and doing daughtering as an adult, we often think of our minds go straight to the ways that older daughters help their older or ill elderly parents. We think, yes, when I'm 70, I will drive my 90-year-old mom to the doctor or something like that. Maybe that's more extreme. But what we miss is the many other types of labor that we're doing that are not just tasks like driving, shopping, phone calling, visiting. And so in my research, I found that women are doing four types of labor as daughters, and that includes the doing of the tasks. It includes emotional, like the feelings that we have, that we are soothing and smoothing. We're avoiding conflict. We're repairing with our parent or with family members. The third type is our cognitive or thinking labor, when we're planning or giving space or worry or strategizing or managing, like a CEO, some things in the family. And the last form of labor is an identity labor or being labor. And so that includes what we do to show ourselves to the world as daughters, even when nobody else is around. And so I found through the research these multiple types of labor that are invisible because we're not talking about daughtering, we're not noticing it, we're not sharing it. And the last big part of that is finding out that women are doing this all across adulthood. And it's not just happening when our parents are ill or elderly. It's from the get-go when we become this more independent state with our parent.
Hmm. Some words that you said that really stood out to me when you were discussing daughtering, that felt like it crossed this invisible line in my mind of roles in the family, was you talked about soothing, managing like a CEO. Now I can tell you, so my husband calls me the CEO of our family.
Love that. Love that.
And it's true. It's not just of the company, of the family business, but the CEO of the family. And it's true. And our roles are pretty well defined. I think we do have a nice division of labor. And for that, I'm grateful. But when I think about in the original family that we're born into and learn to function in and learn how to structure our relationships, learn what our role is in interpersonal relationships. So we learn how to daughter. I'm imagining when you put onto that little child that role of soothing and managing and being the family CEO, and they learn that pattern and then they take that into adulthood, The feeling I have is more a role of mothering. It's the role, like I said, that my husband jokingly and not jokingly says I have in our family of being the CEO, the manager of the family. What does the effect of carrying that role as a daughter have on us when it comes to our interpersonal relationships? And what can we do if that boundary has been blurred to try to define it?
Yeah, it's such an important question to examine the maternal and the maternal lens in our society. One of the things that you really zoned in on that's so valuable and important is that no matter our age, no matter our context or station in life, girls and women are under this maternal lens. White little girls are called little mothers, and we are thought of as reproductive beings. Right. The truth is that many women will go on to never become mothers, whether through biology or adoption or neighboring, and many women will similarly never be partnered. They may never engage in a marriage or romantic relationship. The foundational role that we have is as daughters. We are a daughter the day we are born, and we are a daughter the day we die. Even when our parents have been gone decades, we carry the identity of daughtering and carrying our family name forward. But it's such a great question to ask. Why? Why are we making that valuable, important daughter role so small in our consciousness, in our talk, in our sharing, and not giving it the honor and the place of prominence that it's due? And through my research, what I learned is that a lot of this does have to do with the patriarchal lens of the society that we live in. And when we teach and train women from a young age to think of the maternal, to think that all of our caring behaviors are maternal, to think that all of our loving desires are maternal, to think that our CEO mindset, or I'll tell you, Dr. Shafer, in my family, I call myself the cruise director. It's kind of like if you've seen the show The Love Boat, and the cruise director is always, chatting everybody up, but also telling everyone where to go and always thinking ahead and always aware of the big picture. And if we label all of those skills and all of those fantastic abilities as maternal, we lose this beautiful, essential part of ourselves that as a daughter, we get to be the one who's not in control. Right? We should get to be the one who is cared for, but we take that away from women, the opportunity to be cared for.
Exactly, exactly. And that's the sense I have. And it's interesting because I love how you challenge my mindset around these terms and these states of being. And to me, it's just this boundary that's so poorly defined. And it probably has a lot to do with my own lived experience and other people's lived experience. For one, I came from a household where in one household, I grew up in a family system where there were separate households. And in one household, I was a daughter. I was celebrated for who I was. I was not expected to show up as a parent. In fact, I had a little brother in that household from that new coupling. And if I overextended myself in a too mothering way, I was reprimanded for that. It was like, that's not your role. You're a kid. You don't have to do that. But it was also very confusing because in the other house where I grew up, my role, where there were no other children at the time, my very clearly defined role was to mother the adults and to be the CEO and the referee and the sounding board. So I think it's really interesting how our lived experiences will color our perception of what it means to daughter, what it means to mother, and how we carry those dynamics forward into adulthood. Now, something I've heard you talk about, and I think it speaks to why we carry those dynamics into adulthood, is that the way we have identified ourselves and our sense of self-worth and how we attain that and protect our feelings of self-worth through this dynamic of measuring how good we're daughtering or how good we're mothering, how good we are showing up for the people in our lives. And by the way, those metrics are completely personal, right? There's not an actual measuring stick for being a good daughter, for being a good mother. So why do you feel that so many women have tied their sense of self-worth to being helpful or available to family or others?
One of the ways that we feel, especially in the United States, that we can evaluate everything is through an economic lens. And an economic lens is transactional. And in a transactional society where giving and receiving and debits and credits and bank accounts and, the GDP and what do I contribute are part of our everyday mindset, it becomes really difficult to disentangle that from our family roles. And when we think about, why would that be worthwhile to disentangle it? What could we get out of that? We need to have women understand that we are worthy and we are enough and we are good and our life is valuable and our place in society is valuable without having to earn it. And so sometimes that economic mindset that can work perhaps really well for an economy of a government of a country works very poorly in terms of having a mental ability to gauge our worthiness. And we think of life in a family as different types of trade-offs. And this may be, as you mentioned, because we were told that as a child. That's what we were taught in our family. And I love that you have these two different experiences because you have the benefit of seeing different ways and asking yourself, which one do I like better? Which one do I want to carry forward into my world, into my future? Because we learn how to be a worker, how to be a homeowner, how to be a spouse, how to be a romantic partner, how to be a friend in childhood, the same way we learn language and math. And then we get to decide what we do with it. But often, what I've noticed is that we don't realize we get to decide because we're not talking about how we have options. And so the talking about and the relating to one another over these subjects is really how we make those mental shifts. And one that I would encourage all of your listeners to do is to disentangle mothering from other female roles or other things that you do in your life. Um, an author who I read, Suzanne Walter, said the term mothering is semantically overburdened, meaning we're putting too many things on mothers. That mothers are all good at this, all do this, all da 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 da. And then we're borrowing mothering to talk about daughtering. And so what we end up doing is actually reifying or redoing this cycle that harms us. Because if you are a mother, meaning to be a mother means you have children, not you're a woman in the world. If you have children, then you can't be everything to everyone at all times and continue to have your health and your wellness. You can't give away all of your resources. And so we need to, as a society, what we, I think, continue to work on through these types of podcasts and conversations is how to modulate what is a mother? What is a good mother? And let's take some of that off of mother and call it daughtering, and then identify those little sub things that we do in relationships and call it things like referee or call it things like support or emotional engagement. And that way we're not conflating things that then keep us down in this patriarchal society in a maternal box that we have to and probably should be good at everything that we've labeled maternal.
Oh, how beautiful would it be? I just feel so much lightness in my chest when I imagine putting that box down because it follows us wherever we go. For me, when seeing patients, it's very clear to many of us as female physicians that our role isn't only to treat a condition, to prescribe the correct medication. The role of a female physician is often conflated with mothering, or perhaps better stated, you must simultaneously mother as you are commanding the information that you have learned, the expertise you have garnered in your field. And the reason we know that to be true rather than we just feel that, as some people may push back and say, no, that's just a feeling that you're bringing into this situation because of, again, because of the things you told us about your childhood. There's certainly an aspect of that. However, we know that because of something that's happened in medicine in recent decades, as it has become a standard practice to be asking patients to rate different aspects of their care, we know that the expectations for female and male physicians are very often different. And the expectations are to receive some care that a lot of us would put under the more mothering or daughtering, potentially, depending upon what dynamics the patient has in their lives.
Coaching, teaching, training.
Not coaching, teaching, and training, because
Okay.
a doctor, by definition, is a teacher. That's what we were trained to do. And we should absolutely be doing that with empathy and care and I believe warmth. Warmth to me is a big difference between information and communication. I think when you're telling something really important, you're more likely to connect with them if you do it with warmth. But also, I think there's some conditioning there because we've all seen a variety of physicians during our day, and those of us that are a little bit older, we've seen different generations of doctoring, right? And so we've experienced, most of us have experienced the different approaches to the way someone shows up as a physician, and it's something that female physicians have to navigate and consider and carry that weight with them, as we said earlier, every single day into every single interaction, and make sure that they're not only on the cutting edge of their field, which is extremely challenging because we have new information every single day, right? It's also carrying that that structure that you have to make sure that you're meeting these expectations in the eyes of patients often. Otherwise, you can get this review that doesn't just necessarily, give you pause or even hurt your feelings. Some of them are they're kind of like online reviews, right? We'd never say this to someone's face, but we'll write it down. But it also affects your compensation. If you are able to move up, maybe to be someone who's a head of a department, it has a big effect on your life. And so if our metric is different for women and men because of these expectations, that's really impactful. And I think it goes back to, patriarchal expectations and structures in the workforce and just in our society in general. And so I love what you talked about of, so we exist in this role as daughter, we're showing up in a certain way because it's a habit. It's something that we were potentially modeled as children, and we just keep showing up. Maybe the way our mother showed up as a daughter, or maybe the way that we were expected to show up as a child. I love how you talk about the decision making, but I think it's really important to try to posit how do we do that? Because I think about it like a hamster wheel. You're running, you're running, you're running. As women, we're so busy. We are living out all these roles, whether they're helpful or harmful to us. We often don't even take that pause to consider, am I running in the right direction? Or to consider, I have a choice in this matter. So, how do we encourage daughters if they are moving towards burnout in this relationship, in their relationship with their parents or with other people in their lives because of the way that they are approaching their role in the family? How can we encourage them to take that pause and to really recognize that they get to decide, they get to examine how this has affected them to this point and how they want to move forward in that relationship?
It's such a huge part of the equation is just asking that question. How what kind of relationship do I want? How do I get to that? How do I disentangle these things? So in my book Good Daughtering, the first part of it is asking women to see how much more daughtering you're doing than you ever realized. And then once you start to see it, so a big part of this is the thinking work about who am I as a daughter? What parts of my life are daughtering? What parts are mothering? What parts are doctoring? Or for me, professoring, and how do I see the overlap, but how do I disentangle these things and notice, particularly with daughtering, because it's been hidden for so long, even to me, that I have choices and I have agency in this role. For so long, we have cast daughters in this image of, I think of it as like a vessel, just an open vase or something, and they're just waiting around to have water poured into it. And daughters just receive parenting, mothering, you know, uh, we don't usually say fathering when we talk about what fathers do, but, um, you know, no more do we think of daughtering in that way after doing the work to examine, like, what is this in my life, and especially something that's taking so many resources from me, my time, my energy, my finances, my love, my empathy. These are uh, things that tend to drain the well. I have a choice on whether or not I want to do those things, and I also want to observe, what am I getting back? As in, how does being a daughter and being in a family enrich my life? How does it help me flourish? And if I'm not, then I need to make changes, because really chronic over functioning in the role of daughter or in any role in our life, if we spent too much time, you know, campaigning for a vote and we didn't spend time at home that week, that would impact our life negatively. But in our role as a daughter, we have this training or desire, what we've watched over generations of chronic over giving of women, and it impacts our identity, our stress levels, our emotional regulation, and it's so difficult to disrupt. But the first line of defense is noticing it, and then we can start to make choices about what to keep and what to get rid of. So, my first tip or recommendation to your audience would be, write down 5 things that you are ready to stop doing.
Mm.
Write down some things that don't serve you. Maybe they're not even really serving the family. You don't even know if anyone has noticed them. And you're going to allow yourself to put those to the side and do that as a beta test. Let's just see what happens if I don't schedule every birthday party. Let's see what happens if I don't help my dad in an argument with his sister. Let's just see what happens when I set some of these things down. How does the family shift? And how do I feel as a result of strategic, purposeful change to help improve my life?
That's such a wonderful idea. And it makes me think about, I know you've spoken about the messy middle, and that's something we talk about a lot here on Talks with Dr. Shafer. And what I hear is once we've identified and decided and now we're doing the work, things can get messy because we don't like change. Our families are used to us showing up in a certain way too. And there may be some friction. And in a way, that may be why we've done these things that don't serve us or don't even serve our family for a long time because we're avoiding friction. But that friction, it needs to happen if we're going to have change. Tunde, who is one of my favorite Peloton instructors, she always says, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I think that is such a beautiful way to state it. So now we've done some self-reflection. We've made decisions about what we want to try, about what we like and what we, you know what? Am I allowed to not like that? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try not doing that and see what happens. What does the messy middle of family relationships look like? And how can we navigate that time in a way that allows for building connection, which is really what we're trying to do, build those rather than have the transactional relationships that you talked about earlier, to build a authentic connection rather than in this messy middle. There may come a time where it feels like we're burning bridges. So how can we focus instead on creating connections with our family?
Yeah, we have to let go of our all or nothing thinking that I can only be a good daughter if I carry all of these things, or if I drop any one of these things, everything will fall apart. There's very all or nothing thinking. And I would instead encourage women to think of this as a data gathering session. I'm going to try to stop something and I'm going to see what it adds to my life. I could always pick it up again later, or I could always stop other things later. And I'm just going to do a little data gathering to see what serves me and what suits me because I am a woman with choice. And my family has not just magically dropped into this pattern. We are in this pattern because we each keep practicing the role in the exact same way. But I have a choice to change that. And what you'll find is that you're not going to be living in this ideal beautiful butterflies and sunshine experience with your parent, which many of us seem to be striving for. Like if it's not perfect, and we're not just idyllic and happy all the time, then I must be doing something wrong. Or we see these other types of relationships that are just toxic and trauma and stressed. And the messy middle that I describe is just being somewhere along that continuum. We're not going to have the perfect, but most of us don't have the terrible either. And we
Mm.
have to allow ourselves in each season of life, especially if we have a lot going on. Maybe we have a lot going on at work, or maybe our finances are in shambles, or maybe our kids really need us in this moment, or maybe I'm going through an illness. I'm going to have to let go of some of this perfection ideal and exist in this messy middle and say the relationship is just good enough and I am enough having given what I can. That's what I like to call B plus daughtering. Women are encouraged to strive to be A plus plus at everything, at our career, at being a mom, at being a friend, having a friend group who does cutesy things, at being a spouse, at everything. And it is one of the places where we can try to notice I'm okay if I'm a B plus daughter and I'm still a member of the family. And it looks like these people still love me and still accept me. Now, not every family is that generous, but most of us are in that space where we have enough love in our family that they're going to let us have a down period. And so when we do that, we actually see ourselves being held and accepted and cradled through the fallout of just being there and not having to work in that relationship. And it's in those moments that we can appreciate our family and decide, hey, I think I actually like this. I think I like these people. I think I might have fun here. I think I might enjoy having people check on me or the support. And and you can start to find out what it is that you like about being in a family, because we all deserve that. And I think there are many things there, many benefits there, but we're not always tapping into what we like about being in a family or how it serves us, because we're so focused on serving them.
Hmm. I love that. Wow, so much to think about. You make me think about not only we recently had a guest on, we talked about being a mad scientist and doing these experiments in our lives. And this Dr. Kate, she was focused on parenting. And we were talking about if something's not working, it's okay, be a mad scientist, right? Don't put so much weight to every interaction, everything you do. If it doesn't come out the way you wanted it to, that's great because you learned from it. If we hide that, then we miss out on those lessons. And it begs the question for me, listening to you speak about this from the daughtering perspective and getting the data on, okay, if I let this go, this thing that I don't think is serving me, if I experiment with that, how will that go? Is there value as well in the right setting? As you mentioned, different families have different dynamics, different communication styles, and there are boundaries to how they can communicate happily within and functionally within that family. Is there value to taking the approach like Brene Brown has spoken to? She's your neighbor down there in Texas. How she's spoken about how she will approach her marriage from a percentages of energy of reserves that she has left. So they will come home, and she and her husband Steve, and she has talked about this very publicly about how it may have been a really stressful day and she's got 20. She's got 20% left. That's all she's got. Right. So that's like a D. And the scale you talked about, like it's not even a B plus. It's a D. Like, babe, I'm coming home and I'm gonna give you D level partnering. And that's all I got. That's all I got, man. And he can say, you know what? It's kind of like school that she doesn't cover this, but what I'm seeing in my head, it's like, okay, I think it's a night where we color. Right? That's what we would do with our kids
Yeah.
in
Eat
kindergarten.
eat cereal for dinner. That's
Right,
what that
right.
is.
We'd say, okay, we're going to meet you where you are. If you're a teacher in school and you can tell the classroom's devolving and you see the kids are at a D, right? You're not like, well, time for that math test we planned for. No, you're going to pivot and you're going to say, you know what? I think we're going to do some coloring and we're going to, discuss how we feel about our pictures. Like that's where we need to be in this moment. We're going to be introspective and evaluative about it. Do you think that there is value when you are going about these experiments to actually speak your truth to your family? Like, you know what? I think I've been being an A plus daughter, mom or dad. I think I've been being an A plus daughter. And I need to be a B minus daughter for a while. That's what I need. Do you think there's value in actually speaking that so that it can be understood the amount of energy you're experiencing in this relationship that you are needing to bring to the table?
So much can be accomplished by just talking about things and bringing them to light. It's like once we say them out loud, they're real. And so, one of the things I noticed in my research is that women have an idea of what a good daughter is and what we're supposed to be doing, but often we've never actually asked our parent, how often do you want phone calls? How often do you want visits? What are you expecting of me when you are in elderhood? What do you not want me to do? What do you want me to stop doing so that I can go achieve my full potential elsewhere? As women, we don't often ask that, and we don't think that. We think we have to stay close to home and give all these resources, but we're often our own messed up rubric. Nobody told us to, including our parent. Many times we will find that they're okay with less, and or they're okay with something different. I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna send these groceries and I'm gonna do these 5 phone calls. And your parent may come up with something like, you know what I'd really like is just one great dinner a month. And you realize, wow, that is doable. And they're happy and I'm happy and I get some time back or energy. And it's kind of like mediation in a way. You never know what the other person's going to say they want unless you ask them. But the essence of my degree, my PhD, communication studies, is that the way we move through the world is based on relating to other people. So the things that exist don't just exist in a vacuum or because I thought about them. They're because of how I communicate about them or don't. And so we can change our families, we can change ourselves just through talking. I know that sounds wild, but saying things out loud, letting other people marinate on that thing I've said, and then seeing where it goes, recognizing that when we have a conversation with our partner or our parent or a sibling, they need to be able to go away and let it marinate and then come back. These things are slow. So, family change is very possible, but I like to think about it like wearing a pair of braces. If you put braces on your teeth, you're going to need 2, 3, 4 years. And that's if the braces are working every moment of every day. So if you want to break the cycle or make changes, remember a little bit at a time can still have these huge ripple effects. They can massively change how much you like your family and feel good about being in the family. And it's absolutely possible, even if you just start with talking about what you are doing or what you want. And so in my family, when I started researching this, I started telling my mom about daughtering, and I would say things like, see that right there, that's daughtering, I'm daughtering you. And she would say back to me, thank you for daughtering me today, or thank you for daughtering so well. And we laughed. It sounded very cringe and cheesy, and yet it was so meaningful, like just getting a gold star. And women are often very satisfied and feel so much stronger and better about our roles when we believe they matter, when we're seen, when we feel like people acknowledge the value that we bring. And so it's not always about doing less. Sometimes it's just about being seen. But this is within the reach of every person who is listening to make positive changes. And we're not trying to say, again, sunshine, roses, idealism. We're saying you could be 1% happier. And if you just keep getting 1% happier, then by changing a few small things, that's worth it. Don't stay stuck in what you're stuck in now. Think about, how can I do this like a mad scientist? How can I do a beta test or do some data gathering and try something and then course correct if I need to? Recognizing really small change over time is going to add up. And I think the last thing to say about that is, as we do that, we're modeling for our children how we want them to daughter us or to son us in the future.
I love that. And I love the positive focus because life is an experiment. We make a lot of mistakes. They're data. They're not necessarily that dangerous for us. They're not that destructive often. They're just mistakes. They're data. But I love how we first identify the things that are not helpful, don't serve us. But then once we bring to light what we want, we really stay focused on, rather than, if you have a functioning relationship with a parent, right, and you want to pursue the connection over the correction, rather than getting stuck in and saying, you didn't notice this, you didn't do that, you didn't respond the way I wanted to, really kind of getting focused in that negative energy that's going to kind of get everybody entrenched where they are and stuck. I love your focus on what the goal is, right? What would you like to see? What would I like to see for our relationship, and working towards that goal rather than getting stuck after we've aired our grievances, which there is a lot of importance to identifying dysfunction, identifying places for improvement, but then the building part has to come. And that's where we have to stay really forward focused. And that's what I'm hearing you talk about in trying to move away from over functioning and transactional relationships in our daughtering experience and move again towards that genuine connection with our parents.
Absolutely. There are so many ways to make change, and they don't all have to be about pushing someone else to be different or even necessarily thinking in a self-help type lens. How can I keep improving? We don't necessarily have to do either of those things. We can do what my teenage son always calls narrating. We can just narrate what we are already doing and what it looks like and what it feels like and what it means without trying to make anyone else do anything. And notice that having that shared experience of this is the way that I'm experiencing the daughter mother father relationship, or this is how I'm experiencing um, the dynamic in our family. It can make a huge impact, and that's why I'm such a big advocate for using the right words and not using the sort of the borrowed terms to describe what we're trying to talk about. And that will help us further get nuance and identify that when we what we are talking about and what we do mean in those circumstances. It's kind of like how I personally would never in my marriage say that I was parenting my husband,
Mm.
because that would be really emasculating and really diminishing. And so I would just never use that word. And so I think we have to realize that narrating our life, using the right words or the nuanced words, and describing our experience holds so much value in how our brains start to change and how that change internally can bring about relational changes, how we feel about others, how we feel about our role, how we feel about our parents. And it can bring about enjoyment and positivity in our life. And that is what we need.
Absolutely. And I hear the questioning of, so if you are using a term in a way that maybe it wasn't originally suited for, but it's kind of like a snowball and it's taken on all of this extra stuff throughout your life because of your life experience, your family dynamics, whatever it is. Asking someone, so they hand this giant, let's say your partner does get really upset and says, "Stop parenting me," when you think you're showing up in a different way, you think you're doing your best, you think you're doing a great job. Like, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? Instead of getting upset and putting the weight of your perspective on that word parenting, right? Because you shared how, like, for you, oof, that would have a lot of context to it. Like, that would have a lot of emotionally charged context. Taking the pause to get curious with one another and ask, "Oh, what does that mean to you?" And then to say, "I would have said that I was, doing this." And then I think that allows us to, again, like you have been doing with your work, really focus on building those connections with people so we can really get down to, how do I want to show up in this relationship? I have a choice. What do I want to do moving forward? How do I want to show up as a daughter in my life? As you said, it's from the day you're born until the day you leave this world. All of us as women will be daughters. We can decide today how we want to do that. And you're doing such a beautiful thing by encouraging us to even have this conversation.
Thank you so much. I love seeing women do daughtering with courage, with empathy, with kindness, and thinking that being a daughter is a place of honor in our lives. And it's separate and different from the other things that we do. And it's something that we can embrace and hopefully find the positive in, because so often it can feel heavy, it can feel difficult. And those things and the negative feelings or ruminating or having it in a difficult space, they impact our health. So if we allow our mindset to shift to, what do I have control over? What can I change? how can I use language to shape my experience? My hope for all of your listeners is that you find a little bit more happiness and contentment, and you find support and a place to be held in that role as a daughter. So I'm very grateful to come on here today and talk to you about it.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on Talks with Dr. Shafer. Where can our listeners learn more about your work and your new book, Good Daughtering?
Yes, you can find me on all social media platforms at Daughtering101 and on my website, daughtering101 .com. You can find the book, which is called Good Daughtering, everywhere fine books are sold. And I really hope that you'll grab it for if you are a daughter, if you have a daughter, if you love a daughter in your life, you'll grab it for her. There are activities at the end of every chapter that will help you not just internalize what we've talked about today and intellectualize it, but have action oriented steps to put these things into your life and see meaningful change. So I really appreciate um, seeing how everybody is using those things to make their lives better and happier and their relationships better.
I love that. And please, listeners, if you are exploring the book and its lessons in your life and you have feedback for Dr. Alford or for us here on Talks with Dr. Shafer, please leave it under our promos. We would love to hear your experiences and how it's making an impact in your life and your experience of daughtering. And I want to thank you, storytellers, for being here with us on the show today. We appreciate your time. And we would love to hear your takeaways. As I said, please share this episode with someone who would love this discussion too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Talks with Dr. Shafer where you enjoy podcasts so that you don't miss any of the inspiring episodes we have coming up. Until next time, as always, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Everybody's lonely, but you can hold on to